Welcome to Behind the Curtain IMO. I'm Betsy Jordan, and I'm back with you today to talk about the election, why I think it happened, how I think it happened, and in another episode of this series, I will get into how I think, what I think we can do about it. But Kamala lost, I'm saddened.
To the young people who are watching, it is... I love you. To the young people who are watching, it is okay to feel sad and disappointed, but please know it's going to be okay. On the campaign, I would often say, when we fight, we win. But here's the thing. Sometimes the fight takes a while. That doesn't mean we won't win. That doesn't mean we won't win. The important thing is don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. Don't ever stop trying to make the world a better place. You have power. You have power. And don't you ever listen when anyone tells you something is impossible because it has never been done before. You have the capacity to do extraordinary good in the world. And so to everyone who is watching, do not despair. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves.
Understand, I am not surprised. And that has nothing to do with Donald Trump and has everything to do with the American voter. American voters, or voters in the United States of America, vote for two reasons. One is because they want to take care of their families. So it has to do with prices at the grocery store, prices at the gas pump. And that will be the reason, sometimes that people win or lose elections. If you'll recall, inflation was sky high, COVID was happening, people were afraid they couldn't take care of their families. They voted Trump out. They voted Biden in. Number two, if they're unhappy with the prices at the grocery store, this is not just this election, this is every election, they will look for something to change. I can't feed my family. Something's got to give. I can't make ends meet. I'm having to work 3 jobs. Inflation is high. Over and over and over. That becomes their mantra. What are they going to do? They're already working 3 jobs. Something's got to change. So they vote for change. They vote for dollars in their pocket because they need to take care of their families. And families can look any way. Families can look like 2 people who are cohabitating. It can look like somebody taking care of their community. It can look like somebody who's taking care of extended family. It can look any way, but every American has this thought about prices at the grocery store. How am I going to take care of myself? How am I going to take care of my family? So we talk about the dynamics in the race. Keep that caveat in mind, why American voters vote. Okay. So the day before Biden stepped aside, he had been encouraged, his whole administration, to not run again by people who wanted other people to run. Okay, so understand that pressure was already there. He was dealing with some things in the Middle East, a few things, Ukraine, Russia. He was also dealing with domestically, what were we going to do to create new jobs? We're going to look back and see that he was the most legislatively successful president that we've ever had in terms of his service to the American people as president of all America, not president of one faction of America. So he didn't leave anyone out of it. All right. But not being able to get those prices down at the grocery store and not being able to change the perception, which is the reality, of the American people because of what was happening also in Gaza. Then what happened is that the perception becomes the reality. The reality is what American people are living day to day, and he could do nothing to change that. Nothing beyond what he tried to do. Because I promise you, he made every concerted effort to see that, and he wondered why his people did not understand that America had the strongest economy of anybody in the world. So he had a global perspective, which is what you want in your president, but you also need to understand that most Americans don't see themselves as part of a global economy. But we are, and other countries were suffering far more than we were. But it's not a comparison game. You know, we do think we're exceptional. So Kamala stepped in at just the right time, stepped up to serve her country. I said to the person who told me this was going to happen the night before this happened, that I understood why Biden was saying he was the only person who could win, because we have this albatross called the Electoral College. And people from all over the world think that makes our elections interesting. I think that it makes them not be representative of the people, but I could be wrong. I just think that I'm right. In this case, though, the situation with the economy and with the dollar at the grocery store, consumer economy, dictated what happened in the election, not to mention the stoking of fear that people were taking over their jobs, because it still came down to the dollar at the grocery store. Do you understand? It's like boiling it down. Okay. We're trying to make it about other things, but we can't make it about other things and be correct. So I told the person they're going to push us too far left, because while I think Kamala is a great presidential candidate, I was aware that the Electoral College is in the Farm Belt. The Farm Belt, it's going to be a cold day in hell before they elect a black woman president. I would like to be wrong, but I think I'm right about that. But it was even exacerbated by prices at the grocery store, okay? And it was even exacerbated by, we wanted people to vote their conscience. We wanted people to vote based on a future result. They want to know who's going to help them right now. And Trump spoke to that. It was also a very short campaign for Kamala, of course. Very short, difficult to mount it, though she did a beautiful job, a brilliant job of speaking to the American people, of motivating people, of creating optimism and hope. And that is exactly what our country also needs. Even if you voted for Trump, you still need optimism, you still need joy, and you still need hope. That's why your country still needs you if you voted for Kamala. Don't give up on optimism and hope and joy. We need a double dose of it right now. Kamala couldn't effectively distance from Biden's economy, nor did she really want to, okay? Because it also was something she had participated in, right? It was part of her resume too. And they were still negotiating for peace in the Middle East, still working on immigration. What could we do with the tools we have right now? But Americans chose change. Prices at the grocery store. Instead of the Inflation Reduction Act, it probably should have been called Feed My Family Act, okay? They realized something's got to change, and they would even vote for a dog catcher or Hitler because they were so desperate for that kind of change. It was a desperation in America that we were not speaking to. I know that I railed against the Electoral College. I've already mentioned that the Electoral College will mean that we continually have a conservative president. That's just how it will roll out. Historically speaking, we need to pay attention to our history. This episode is going to be a little bit longer because I am uncovering all the things, right? So please hang in here with me. The other side says they don't want to get rid of the Electoral College because they don't want New York and LA and Atlanta to dictate their president. But that's where the American people are located, and we do still live in a democracy. And having said that, I know that there's going to be a campaign against Electoral College based on what I just said, right? Well, we don't want a democracy then, you see, and perhaps they don't. But Trump did win the popular vote, so it proves that a Republican can win the popular vote. Now, we won't get into what Trump has promised us. We won't get into that. And if you're listening and you are a Trump supporter and a Trump voter, understand, this is not a beat-up session. This is to understand what happened in this election. Okay, I'm not planning on having a beat-up session. I don't think those are valuable. I spoke to the fact that we had already had a bipartisan bill. Now, Trump planned this campaign. The minute 2020 was over and he knew that Biden was going to be inaugurated, he planned to run again. in his head. And he has been working on this whole time and weighing in on things that former presidents would never have done. So why was there an insurrection last time? Well, Trump never admitted defeat. Why was there an insurrection? There was the demonizing of the other side, of us, okay? There was still a demonizing of us throughout the campaign. Just like us, they thought that the election was stolen. Now, the reason I say just like us is because plenty of people have brought up to me that they think 20 million votes were missing, and they want to say that there was something wrong with the election. I understand feeling the way that they felt. I understand these folks who are saying, we can't lose our country. We need to be ready. We need to be revolutionizing. We need to be resisting. Isn't that what they did? Isn't that what they thought? Didn't the polls indicate that Trump was going to win? Yeah. And we thought we were close and that we could pull it out. And that some of the polls that had been paid for skewed red. Some very popular and very credible pundits were saying this. I said it myself, that some of the polls had been paid for and some of them were influencing it to look more like Trump was going to win, when actually those polls were more accurate. So I won't be duped again, but I will tell you that I did mislead some people myself. And so afterwards I understood why we were feeling like the election had been stolen, but it hadn't been. It hasn't been. This was the most secure election we've ever had in this country, because both sides made it so. Made me think of Star Wars and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Anyway, so let's look at this, how we were feeling all along. And this is not Monday morning quarterbacking. This is, please understand that when Kamala stepped in, already Biden's approval rating was way low. She couldn't distance herself from Biden. She is a woman and a black woman. And so she was bringing up issues just by being who she is for people, because they had to confront their own racism, their own bigotry. They didn't want to do that, right? So they made it about other things. But Kamala ran the best campaign she could, and reproductive freedom was on the line. And issues that matter to women are still on the line. And there are women dying as a result of getting rid of Roe v. Wade. So we're going to need to fight for that, to restore Roe v. Wade. We're going to need to continue to fight for that, because we need to continue to fight for our sisters who are dying, and daughters who have miscarriages but they can't get a simple D&C, which would save their life. That is otherwise known as a late-term abortion, for those of you who are watching this. But I did say at my very first meeting, which happened to be the same time as the debate of the Biden Victory Fund in Atlanta, I did say, we're going to have to tie reproductive rights to the dollar. We're going to have to say, don't vote your pocketbook this election if you want to continue to be able to vote. We get it. This is bad. But instead we shied away from the stuff, saying, we know how you feel. We didn't even connect in that way. Now, I'm not saying that I'm right and the campaign was wrong. That might have been the wrong advice, but I did say that. And I didn't have the courage to follow it up. Now, I have a lot of courage, but I wasn't quite sure that I was right. And then I realized how they were saying that they weren't against, women having choices. They were going to states' rights. They were throwing it to states' rights. And then I saw the writing on the wall for that. If they go for states' rights, they're going for the dissolution of the United States of America. Because if they keep throwing it back to the states, anyway, there is another episode where I say states' rights, no. So you can get more into that. But the justification for voting for Trump, even though they knew that he had been convicted of a sexual assault, and his attitude, at least publicly, in his first campaign was so horrendous toward women, that they justified their stand for pro-choice and for women by saying, well, the states can handle it, because Donald Trump gave them permission to say that, right? And he said, look, I'm not really against, I don't really want to ban abortion. Okay, so we get to hold him to that. He said that in a national debate, right? He said he tried to distance himself from Project 2025. We can still hold him to that because he got his voters, people who voted for him, to believe him, okay? So their conscience was clear. They were voting their pocketbook. And getting anything through that was true about the campaign that would require us to shift meant like turning of a cargo, a tanker, really. We didn't have time for that. So we couldn't really shift anything measurably. And her campaign was really successful for someone who stepped in at the time that she stepped in. And my God, would she have been a great president. She would have been a great president for the United States of America. And so I really am so grateful to her for running, and so grateful to all the people who stood up and just shifted and went full force behind Kamala. It was hard for some of us, you know, who knew that Biden pulled from a moderate place in our country and who were frightened that he wasn't going to be able to, that she wasn't going to be able to take the Electoral College. We knew that that headwind was definitely there. Now, I want to talk a bit about young men and Generation Z. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to end here because this is the longest video or longest episode I've ever done. And I'm going to do another episode. This was Behind the Curtain, IMO. Thank you for being here.